So we're very fortunate at IDCWIN to have this wonderful gentleman named Eric Wachtel. Eric was actually one of the very, very first people to join IDCWIN. Ronnie brought him on board initially to be an advisor with IDC, and then over his 17 years has evolved into, at one point, running all our training and education, introducing our LEAP selling program. Eric evolved into the role of our Chief Compliance Officer and is doing an absolutely phenomenal job. And there are many of you in this room who have utilized Eric's services when you are maybe going to be audited by Fiscal or those wonderful people called FinTrack. Eric has helped so many of our advisors across Canada to get you ready for these kind of audits. So we are so fortunate to have Eric Wachtel with us as our National Compliance Officer. Would you please welcome Eric, and he will be introducing his panel. Eric Wachtel.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here at the Presidents Conference. I've had a chance to see many of you I've met before and meet some of you for the first time. So as a compliance officer, I have a unique experience where I get to meet people who are glad they've never met me before. And they introduce me to their spouse. Hey, this is the compliance. He doesn't know me. That's a good thing, right? So, and I have a bad memory for names. So, but actually, you know what? As Phil, our president, said yesterday, compliance has been evolving at a rapid pace over the last couple of years, and I travel across the country to our different offices, our managers holding our university days, compliance events, and I am just so welcomed by all you folks. You're so happy to learn about compliance. You say, come on, can you meet with our staff, look at what we're doing, tell us if it's right or not, and it's just a great message. You're so engaged. And in my role in CALBA, I'm the compliance chair for legislative affairs. I get to a lot of roundtable discussions, and I get into a lot of doors. So I sit at regulatory meetings, focus groups, and I bring that message to the regulators. That you know what, our advisor population is so engaged. And it's not just the advisors, it's the associations. I sit at the table with advocates and IFB and CLHIA. And we're in front of the regulators, and we're in front of CCIR, and they can see we're working together. And they hear about some of our initiatives like APEXA, how the industry is getting organized. And I can see it's having a calming effect on the regulators. And that's exactly what we want. We want a calming effect. They can see, wow, you guys are kind of self-regulating. So it's just amazing the dynamicism that I see from advisors. You're eating this stuff up. You want to know how to get into the future. And it's so important because this business has to continue. You know, when Phil quoted that stat yesterday, that consumers working who have advice on average accumulate 2.73 times more asset than consumers that don't over a 15-year period. What a stat. Our speaker Chantal yesterday said she keeps a copy of Harold Ballard's will on her desk. I keep a copy of that stat on my desk. It's amazing, and it's because of the work you folks do out there, and it has to continue unabated. Yeah, there's some things that need to be cleaned up, and we'll talk about some of that today, but it's such a great business, and the work you're doing, and where does that 2.73 times more asset come from? Rate of return? It doesn't come from rate of return. It comes from you sitting with clients year after year, and they know that you care, and so they care about what you know, and you convince them to buy products and combine those products and keep those products. And then that's the result that they end up with. So it's just a great business. And you know, don't for a second think that we don't appreciate the efforts you're making and the challenges you go through. You know, Andy mentioned I joined IDC in 2001, and right from the beginning, you know, our leader, Ron Madzia, he always had this appreciation and admiration for hardworking advisors. And he instilled that in the staff. It was contagious, man. You know, I remember him saying that, and the managers that joined us subsequently, Andy and Greg and Stephen and Paul, everyone shares that same sentiment. It's like a love affair with hardworking advisors. I remember one time I overheard Ron saying to Andy, there was an advisor who was going through some issues, personal issues, business challenges, and Ron said, look at this guy. He's going through ups and downs, highs and lows, and yet there's something in the mail every day, every week. He's doing some apps every week. He just doesn't stop. He keeps kicking and keeps punching. And that type of thing, so we're here to serve you. We're here to support you. You know, you want our programs, marketing programs, Don does a great job, our compliance programs. We're here to give you whatever you need. And if you need us to just stay the hell out of the way, we'll stay the hell out of the way. But we love you guys. So on that note, I'd like to have the great pleasure of introducing my distinguished panel here today. So speaking of support, we're going to give you some compliance support so that you can understand what's happening in our environment today. So compliance in the life insurance industry. I think this is kind of a fitting picture because, you know, for the last several decades, we know our industry didn't go through a lot of change. And sometimes no change is good. But for the most part, we've been sleeping like a baby. You know, advisors knew that they had to have certain procedures in their practice. We've been in a principles-based environment, had to document client files, and for the most part, particularly the caliber advisors in this room, you have nice, thick, well-documented client files. But nevertheless, the fact remains that no one was really knocking on your door to check. Right? So this was a very peaceful situation. Fast forward to today, and I get more advisors that come to me looking like this. They're being audited by their regulator. They're suddenly in the same week, they're told they're being audited by an insurance company, a CLHI member insurance company. Perhaps they've received one of those brown parchment scary envelopes from the government with red Government of Canada lettering saying they've been chosen for a FinTrack audit. One of the advisors who was going through this told me, you know, I'm a CFP, CLU, in all my 30 years. I've never experienced anything like this. What is going on? So what we're here today to do for you, hopefully, is give you some background and perspective into what's happening. And sometimes the more important question is why it's happening, because it's a lot easier to adapt to something when you know why it's happening. So let's get started. So now, I think this is a good theme for the day, which is drinking out of a fire hose. And that's how advisors can feel. But I'm sure that's how you're feeling as well. Don't imagine you're sitting around your offices twiddling your thumbs with nothing to do.
No.
So there's a lot coming at you. So I'm just going to turn it over to each. We'll start with you, Kim.
Oh, okay.
And just tell me a little bit about what's happening in your world.
So just to give you a little bit of background, my responsibility is for the market conduct. So most of my comments that I'll make in this slide will be about the market conduct. So market conduct is what I term as advisors behaving poorly. Keeps my team a little busy sometimes. So we are working on audits, as Eric has mentioned. ManuLife has been doing advisor-facing audits for a number of years now. Not so much in our MGA channel, more so in our independent advisor channel, but we are going to be expanding that. So some of the things that we're working on is making sure we're up to date. Is our privacy questions the right ones? Are our AML questions the right ones? Do we have everything captured so that when we are sitting in front of an advisor in their office, we've got the ability to say, no, we know, we're current, this is what you need to do, here's the best template. You know, Eric's got a lovely set of templates as well. How do we make sure that we're working on those ones? And then some of the other things that we're doing, which is kind of exciting for me as a compliance officer, maybe not so much for you as advisors, we are really starting to use our data. We're looking at the data analytics to try and do predictive risk assessments to maybe go out and talk to that advisor before he or she goes rogue. To have that dialogue to say, this isn't making a lot of sense to us, can you help us understand? So working really closely with some very, very smart people who talk a language I don't understand in the data analytics space to look at what can we see, what can we do, and then how can we better address that in my team.
Great. Colin.
Yeah, sure. So there's lots going on this year. We sometimes call it the regulatory tsunami because it feels like it's just wave after wave of change that's coming at us. So just to hit a couple of the high points that I've been busy with this year, Certainly fair treatment of customers is the regulatory priority, and I won't say a lot about it now. I think we'll be talking about it throughout this presentation. But that's definitely something that we're seeing a lot of activity from all of the regulators, particularly CCIR and the provincial insurance regulators. And then I guess another one that I've been spending some time on is on the AML side. New regulations, draft regulations released in June this year. So there's been a lot of back and forth between the industry and the Ministry of Finance and OSFI and FinTrack on those. And it's interesting because at the same time as they're releasing these draft regulations, they're consulting on another set of AML changes. So it feels like, it's just one after another after another. And so those are kind of the things that we're working on, and we'll talk more about them as we go.
Great, thanks, Colin. And Lynn?
Just to set some context, my role is really to look after emerging regulatory trends. And I know there's this water picture of the water coming at me. There are days where I feel like the water's coming out of my eyes because this is the high volume of regulatory change that's coming. So I keep track of the securities regulation changes as well as the insurance. And the reason it's important to keep track of both is because we're seeing a convergence of both insurance and securities regulations. So it's important to see what's coming through on the security side because they're indicators of what's coming through and is going to come through in the insurance side. So as an example, we already know of the segregated funds, the performance disclosures, the cost disclosures, they're all mirroring and following the mutual fund industry. Within Ontario, we talked about the fiscal. In April of 2019, it's going to be replaced by FSBRA. And the model and the structure, where it's going to mirror the Ontario Securities Commission. So it's going to be a little bit more prescriptive. There's definitely going to be more enforcement. But at the same time, we're hearing stories and we're actually experiencing more collaboration, which will provide us an opportunity to actually provide industry opinions when there are consultations in terms of regulations. So we're just keeping track of both of them because that's important for us so that we can prepare and plan for it as a business.
Great. Okay, and last but not least, and nice socks, Gord.
Thank you.
It's a theme of the conference.
Yes, it is. Good morning, everyone. We have a bit of a unique team that I look after, and we support three broad channels of Freedom 55, our WISE channel, and the MGA channel. And we are within distribution, and I challenged our team last year to think through, and a comment that Phil made yesterday, that compliance doesn't have to be complex. How can we help advisors meet their obligations with simplicity? So that's the challenge that our team goes through every day. And the three focuses that we have right now are, number one, we're broadening our regional support model for compliance. We want to have consultants like compliance wholesalers across the country that advisors can call on and where they can support in the MGAs as well. Secondly, we want to enhance our support to the MGA channel. So we want to get out there and do education sessions like IDC University Days that we've done a few of. Continue to support that and support compliance officers like Eric with tools and templates. Third, we want to focus on, and going back to Phil's comment, on simplicity. We want to enhance our tools and templates to support each of you, whether it's programs or training modules. Like we do get asked a lot for simple training modules that help you meet your obligations. Or the current focus right now is around digitizing. Questions from advisors: can we go electronic? Can we not put that paper in front of that disclosure of privacy and paper in front of the client? Can we not do something electronic like Wealth Simples of the world do? Can we move that way? So that's what we're focusing on right now, is trying to simplify and go digital with some of our templates and tools.
That's great. Okay. So launching onto that theme of fair treatment of consumers. And if you haven't heard that term, you're going to hear it a lot in the coming months and years. So starting kind of at the top of the regulatory world, we have the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, the IAIS. And they consist of regulators from almost 140 countries. And they publish 26 insurance core principles. It's about a 400-page document. And Canada was audited by the IAIS in 2013 and is facing down another audit in 2019. So what are your thoughts and where do you think this FTC is going? So maybe I'll throw that out to you, Colin, since you mentioned that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think this is definitely a trend in the insurance industry, is this pressure from above. So you've got the IAIS that's sitting up there and is sort of making pronouncements on a global scale, and then those are filtering down to each of the countries, including Canada. And that's where a lot of the fair treatment of customers principles originated, was in the IAIS documentation. So that's now come down to the Canadian Provincial Insurance Regulators, the CCIR, and they've been working on crafting their fair treatment of customers guidance. So CCIR has published that, and FSCO has published it as well. And so that applies to both the insurance companies and to the advisors and to the MGAs as well. So sort of across the entire industry, and so that's something that we all need to be aware of. And it's very broad, so it speaks to all areas really. So from product design to distribution. Illustrations. Absolutely, illustrations, customer service, claims handling, all of those things are encompassed within that. And so that's something that certainly we're spending a lot of time making sure that we have the right processes in place to support that and to demonstrate that we're doing what we need to, and also that the advisors that we work with are also doing what they need to on that front.
Okay, great. And I mean, just so everyone knows, the IAS is like, where did these guys come from? Well, they didn't just come from nowhere. They were formed in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, where, lo and behold, it was determined that, hey, you know what, a lot of consumers were buying things they didn't understand. And we had this near catastrophic meltdown. And so the IAS, at that point, started their work. And this is where we're at. And fair treatment of consumers is definitely a rallying cry. So one of the things I think that's come out of this, in terms of regulatory pressure from above, is the CCIR now, bringing these standards back to Canada and measuring Canada against the world. And from a carrier perspective, one thing that really stands out is that CCIR now requires each carrier to complete an annual statement of market conduct.
Oh.
And that's, as I understand it, Kim, is pretty substantial.
Yes.
It's an initiative that CCIR launched in February 2007. It requires each carrier to report to CCIR what they're doing related to fair treatment of consumers, such as disclosure practices and advisor auditing. So I think that's, tell us a little bit about the annual statement of market conduct.
Yeah, it's an absolute monster. It's a really large exercise that crosses like the entire organization at ManuLife, at all of our companies. Colin, it's near and dear to his heart as well.
Absolutely.
And they ask us, who are your top 25 distributors? They ask us, when was the last time you were in their office from a compliance perspective?
By distributor, is that MGA or?
That's you. Yep, they ask us about our distribution. They ask us very pointed financial questions. They are currently examining how they're going to add information about our travel business into the market conduct document. But the reason that they're doing it is that the CCIR is also looking to proactively identify trends, and they're hoping that this massive data dump will somehow help them with some of that. I think that they're experiencing some challenges. We've been working with them through the CLHIA, which is the Canadian Life and Health Association, which is the member companies. We work with them to try and ensure that what we give them has value to them. But then I'm going to assume that most of us as insurance companies are also looking at this data that we've collected and gone, well, what should we be doing with this? So it's been a lot of work. It's been a very interesting exercise. And I'll go further to say that ManuLife also had the complete luxury of being one of the companies that the CCIR audited for fair treatment of customers. So they actually came and spent 2 weeks with us. So just as you are audited, we are audited. And we went through explaining the industry to the CCIR. So it was the AMF, Ontario, FSCO, and New Brunswick. Talked to them about how we set compensation. What do our contracts look like with you folk? How do we deal with conduct issues? How do we deal with complaint issues? So there's a lot of moving pieces for all of us that keep us very busy. And so we're continuing to engage with the regulators because in our education, they're getting to understand your business better. And that's going to be of benefit for you, because the last thing is we want regulation when they don't understand how you actually interact with your clients. So we're working hard to make sure that that happens.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I just echo, I guess, Kim's comments because I'm responsible as well at our company for coordinating the completion of the CCIR annual statement. And one of the things that makes that important is it means that all of the provincial regulators get a full picture of the industry, which they may not have had before. And so all of this information is now being shared much more broadly than it ever was between all of those regulators. And so they're able to identify not only what all of the insurance companies are doing, but they get a better picture of what products are on the market, how many distributors are there, across all of the companies, those sorts of things. And so they'll be able to target their efforts a lot more. And as they continue to get increased funding, which we're seeing in Ontario and BC and likely other provinces, I think we'll just continue to see them be able to target those efforts and step up their examinations and things of that nature as well.
Lynn, how much in your work in terms of emerging trends are you seeing fair treatment consumers starting to rear its head?
Yeah, it's definitely, well, it's here, fair treatment of customers on the insurance side, especially since it's just been published. But on the security side, we have there's an equivalent version, and it's really called there's a client-focused reforms. And it deals with the same principles, and it's all about doing the same thing, right thing for the clients. But it covers and it raises the bar for the advisors and the actually carriers and the intermediaries. So there's a lot of work that's being done on that front in terms of, well, what does this all mean, and how do we translate that for our business processes, and what does it mean for the advisor when they say they raise the bar, because the bar is quite high today in terms of dealing with clients, and we're all putting our clients first. We're all doing the right thing, and then there's this raising of the bar. So what is different as it relates to the fair treatment of customers, and what are they looking for? So we're looking at what's the incremental change from what we have today. And is it really necessary to add additional processes because we're already there? But at the same time, we recognize it's important to continue to enhance the processes. So the question is, how do we build that into what we have to make it easier for, to deal with the clients? So that definitely is one of our challenges today.
That's good to hear. Gord, how much of your design and work and templating is being driven by FTC?
Well, it's still at a kind of a high level. It hasn't really waterfalled its way down to our world. One of the areas that we have had to apply is to make sure that as a carrier, on the incentive side for fair trade consumers, to make sure as a carrier we're not doing anything that would just promote our company's product over another in terms of causing an advisor at point of sale to not act in the best interest of the customer. So that's one of the areas that's in real terms has been applicable.
Okay, great. So now, would it be safe to say, and I guess I'll throw this over to Kim again, so getting down now to the advisor level, and we have these wonderful CLHIA member carrier audits that you mentioned. Would it be safe, again, on that twiddling thumbs theme, I always tell advisors who have been selected for an audit, it's not like the carriers had nothing to do and they just said, hey, let's go audit some advisors. This, to a certain point, has been driven by the annual statement of market conduct and the results you're expected to give to CCIR.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. It's totally a part of that. There is also a CLHIA bulletin. So again, the things that us as companies, we adhere to on the 25 random audits. ManuLife did implement we're into our second year. We attempted to do it as an electronic review. So coming out, asking a series of questions, asking for documents back. We've kind of learned that maybe that didn't work so well. We weren't getting the adherence to the questionnaire the way that we should be. So we're re-examining that currently. So I have an examination team who spend 85% of their day or their year on the road. And what they're responsible for is not just these audits, but also individual face-to-face reviews, the review that you experience. We come to visit you to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do. We go and see our national account partners, and then various other areas within ManuLife. So a very busy team. They are across Canada, and what they're trying to do is come up with a better interaction so that you as advisors, when you get this questionnaire of 10 to 15 questions, go, oh, right, I know what this is, I know what I need to do, here's my policies, here's my stuff, but if I've got any questions, I know that I can connect with Eric, or I can connect with any of the folk on my team to help guide through. If you're missing something, it's fine, let's find it now, before Fisco, before the AMF, before Saskatchewan, who's talking about coming out to do audits as well. So a lot of our regulators are also starting to look at advisor reviews themselves. So let's get your house in order first.
These are the friendly audits. Really.
These are the friendly audits. Yes.
And the response at first was a bit, I mean, just if you feel like you haven't heard of this, you're not alone. Like some advisors, when I followed up to say, why haven't you responded, they thought it was spam.
Yeah, we use SurveyMonkey. We won't be doing that again. Yeah, that was one of our fatal flaws. They didn't, and that was
from you, other carriers.
Yeah, we were trying to again make it as least intrusive as possible. So yeah, they weren't seeing it. So we'll likely do it with a bit of a phone call now and say hi. You know, we would like to do this with you. But yeah, they're the friendly audits. The other audits, you know, when life is not going well, are very differently focused, and you don't really get a voice as to when we might be showing up or coming tomorrow. So respond to these ones. These ones won't land you in the other issue unless we find big issues, but chances are, let's just get your house in order. It's much nicer to deal with it from this perspective. We've seen client complaints go away because an advisor has fantastic notes, fantastic reason why, fantastic needs analysis. So it's gone. Eliminate that issue for yourself.
Yeah. It's nothing other than what an E&O lawyer would ask to defend you.
Absolutely,
Yeah, right?
absolutely. And what you're going to probably start to see is that in our complaint handling processes, we're going to start to ask you for those documents as well. So if there's a complaint that comes to ManuLife and it's about a particular client, and we reach out to you to say, hey, we need to gather your version of events, we're going to start to say, where's your needs analysis? Where's your reason why? Can we have a copy of? Because it just solidifies that you have done the job that you do every day and you've documented it really well.
Colin, what's Equitable Life's experience been?
Yeah, we've been doing it. This is our third year, so we do have a little bit of results to talk about now. And generally, you know, we've had really good results. So it's been quite positive in terms of what we've seen. In terms of issues that we have found, last year the biggest issue was probably around disclosure. So disclosing the companies you represent or the conflicts of interest, those sorts of things. We did find that missing on some advisors. Much better on that front this year. This year, probably the biggest issue, and there weren't a lot, but the biggest one would have been continuing education credits. So being able to provide the documentation to support the fact that you've taken your continuing ed, that one is missing on a few. So overall, though, results have been really good, and where something is missing, say on an anti-money laundering policy, whatever it might be, we're working with the advisor to make sure that things are put into place, and through the MGA as well. So yeah, just generally, I would say results have been good, and we'll continue these reviews as we go.
And I mean, certainly the C, when I say friendly audits, you know, if you're an advisor that gets caught CD short with Fisco, that's an automatic fine. In BC, it's a larger fine and a suspension. So it's too late when it's too late. So it's good to find out about these things now. So Gord, Canada Life was definitely one of the early that I recall.
Yep.
And gives the advisor a beautiful color-coded green, yellow, red. Here's where you're green, here's where you're yellow, here's where you're red. And what's your team's experience been?
Yeah, I think friendly is the appropriate word. We're trying to position these reviews as educational for the advisor. I'm not sure if any of you have been selected for a ManuLife review. We do about 50 or 60 a year. And we have a report back to the advisor basically saying, here's some of the gaps you might have, here's some of your strengths. So it's to help prepare you to strengthen your practice should a regulator come along. So once you position it that way, they've been received very well. And if there is a gap, we'll provide actually a copy of a template. Like if the AML program's not done, we'll say, okay, here's a template you could use. So the appetite for closing those gaps have been very strong. So in general, the results have been quite good. I will say that somewhat skewed towards bigger MGAs like yourselves, the results have been very positive. Having teams like Eric's team that have been out and educating really drives results. We've seen some of the smaller MGAs without that infrastructure, their results being much weaker because they're not aware of some of these compliance requirements. So there is somewhat differences between the MGAs.
Now, just getting into the details of what these audits look like. And because you're subject to audits from 3 different entities in this business. You're subject to your regulator in your province, you're subject to a CLHA member audit, and you're subject to FinTrack audit. So, but in both the regulator and the CLHA member audits, up on the screen here is what you see, what they're generally looking for. And I guess I'll throw this back to you, Gord, because your team has developed such fulsome templates and tools. Generally, they're looking for an AML compliance manual, anti-money laundering, which you're required to have by law, which consists of 6 points. And I always kind of joke that it's a document that should make a thud. You have to have by law a privacy compliance regime because we're a triple threat industry, right? We collect more private information than any other business in the world. Health info, financial info, identity info. Got to take steps when our disclosure and our privacy consent says I'll collect, retain, and protect your data. You want to think clearly about what you're doing to protect that data, and your privacy regime does that. And then a general or a market conduct manual, things like proof of E&O, CE, holding out business cards. So 2 main areas, and the one area is practice compliance. So are you seeing any particular weakness more than client files?
No, I'd say, subject to my earlier comment about the smaller MGAs in terms of awareness, the AML and privacy program compliance has really improved over the last couple of years as that awareness has got out and people have used the templates. So that's really strengthened. And on the approach, I'll touch on that I think in a future slide, but we do look at, from a client file documentation perspective, all the different aspects of that. But in general, similar to Colin's point, the results have really improved. And I think the awareness around CE credit tracking is improving. We're finding that as well.
Eric, if I can just speak to the privacy for a moment. What we find for the most part is that you do have a privacy program in place. It's the sharing of passwords inside your office that tends to get folks a little tripped up for privacy. It's, they're tacked on the assistant's board and she or he can be using multiple logins. So if that's your practice today, maybe that could be something you can change quickly when you go back to the office. And then it would be the breaches. Your sole proprietors in an office. It's that breach of data. We've had a couple really small incidents so far where advisors have had their data stolen. It's a huge issue, and you have to tell your clients.
The obligation to report, effectively first, just increased.
So that's going to be very distracting to have to tell your clients that you've lost their private information. So worth making sure that you've got that stuff all tidied up as well.
I mean, as Kim stated, it's not if, it's when.
It's unfortunate.
And it's not just it's cyber breaches, cyber attacks. Several of our advisors have told me they were cyber attacked, and boy, when you come into your office one day and your laptop's not there, or it's there and you turn it on and there's a message from someone saying they have your data, it's a pretty disturbing day. We offer tools such as Panic Computing NPC, where you lease a fully encrypted laptop where their encryption and data destruction protocols are so strong that the loss or theft of an NPC unit is not reportable to the Office of the Privacy Commission. That's how strong they are. And yeah, it's a monthly lease, but I think the days when we go out and buy a laptop from Best Buy and throw Norton antivirus on it, say I'm protected, I think 3 years from now, we'll all be looking back thinking, I can't believe I used to do that. Like, this is people's data. So yeah, that's a good point. Any other comments? Maybe I'll move on to the approach.
Okay.
So important to note here. Let me just give a little bit of background. Has everyone heard of the approach? No? Okay, good. Glad you're here. Here's a bit of background. So going way back to spring 2006, the CCAR, so the Canadian Council of Insurance Regulators, and CISRO endorsed 3 principles for managing conflicts of interest that might arise in the sale of life or health insurance. So again, they're being measured by the IIS. So those 3 were the interest of the consumer must be placed ahead of those of the advisor. Number 2, actual and potential conflicts of interest must be disclosed. Number 3, the recommended product must be suitable to the needs of the consumer. So CCIR and CISRO agreed that the industry should take the lead in developing something to deal with this 3rd issue, which is making sure a recommended product is suitable for that consumer. So working with, in consultation with CLHIA and KILBA and Advocates and IFB, came up with something called the approach. And kind of like the name says, this is how you approach a new client and how you document a client file. So up on the screen here, you see the 7 elements really, well it looks like 6, but no, 7, which is advisor disclosure, client engagement, which is really managing expectations of the client. Number 3 is fact-finding, needs assessment. Number 4, recommendations. Number 5, reason why limit. A lot of people ask, what's the reason why limit? So that's kind of a new one. So some of these are old, some of them new, but now it's been organized into this format and with accompanying meeting notes and things like that. So I'll ask the panel now, in your experience, like we use this word progressive a lot in compliance. Don't fix everything overnight. Let's take a progressive approach. So in your experience and your auditing advisors, how are they doing in terms of the client files? Kim?
We find, as Colin mentioned, advisor disclosure isn't always in the file. Doesn't mean that it maybe wasn't covered off verbally, but we're not finding it when we test the files.
Are you asking for it signed?
I believe that we ask for it to be signed, but I will validate that for you.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it needs to be signed. So it's not there. Fisco made that comment in what they published just yesterday as well. They're finding that it's not listing the companies that an advisor represents. But that's a pretty easy fix for most offices. Not seeing that. What we find is that historically the meeting notes might not have been very good, but that, as you say, progressively they've gotten better. Where you might find the napkin from a sale that was 15 years ago, today you're finding something a lot more substantial in behind that file. And then the reason why in the needs assessment, so newer components, we've been softly trying to introduce that to advisors when we're out talking with them. It is now supposed to be cited as a deficiency in an audit. It's not a best practice anymore. So that is something that is very documented. I know that you've got the templates available for your folk if they're looking for them. It gives you that opportunity to crystallize to your client the why behind the original sale, and then why did they pick what they picked? Because 10 years later, they might not remember that they couldn't have afforded that product. So you made a decision to go with a lesser face amount. So again, it's that client protection component and complaint proofing your office.
So would it be accurate, because some advisors will say, you saying for a simple mortgage sale, I have to have 7 elements in the file, to which, if you had 3 or 4 of these, you're probably looking pretty good.
Yeah.
The regulators, you'd be surprised how many advisors only have a photocopy of an application in a client file. So if I turn over to you, Gord, in terms of, are you seeing all 7 requirements fairly reliably, or is it kind of more of a smattering?
No, I think it's a broad spectrum, and one of the things I highlight is that this is a very principled area, not like the mutual fund side where you have to have a KYC, you look for the presence. This is a very principle of trying to meet the elements of needs-based selling. And when we look at client files and we do the assessments, we're looking for documentation that tells the story of the sale. And that we look at it from that perspective, and we give that report to the advisor to put you in a good position of knowing what is a strong file. And if I got complaint or litigation from a client, what a good file would protect me at. So we're trying to give you that background. But each sale is different according to this principle. If you have a simple term sale, what documentation you need to support that is very small versus something more complex. So we look at it from that perspective. We open the file, did the documentation tell the story of the sale? If a third party looked at it, if there was a complaint or litigation, how strong would your file be? So we give the assessment based on that basis. And I will say that, and we report our results from our 3 channels up to the board, that our MGA results on the client file has been the strongest of any of our channels. Sales suitability in terms of 80 to 85% of files in the MGA world are getting a strong score, which shows the diligence each of you are putting into documenting your work. So it's a really strong result we're seeing on the MGA side. Subject to advisor disclosure, as Kim and Colin said, that one I think still needs a little bit of more awareness and work, but on the client file side, we're seeing some really good results.
That's good to hear.
Eric, if I just add to that, I just wanted to mention as well that in our advisor audits, I was really surprised at how many had the reason why letter, because that is pretty new, and we were seeing a lot of those. So it really is a great defense if there are complaints or litigation to have something that says this is why I suggested that you purchase this, or this is you said you didn't want to buy this product. So I was really happy to see that, and I think it's important that we continue to do that as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the questionable things that come out of regulations, that's the reason why, like, 3 months, we all know 3 months after a client buys something, they forget what it is, why they bought it. So that's
Exactly.
a nice summary. Lynn, coming from the other side of the fence, the security side, where advisors commonly do 2 hours of compliance a day, do you have any thoughts on how these audits are going and what you see?
Yeah, I think from the other side, and I would say from meeting notes tends to be an area of focus, definitely. And it varies across the advisor world. So we're seeing a sense of some cases there's no meeting notes, in other cases there are. But I look at it in terms of, when we have our discussions with our clients, it's all about keeping track of some of those conversations, and I think that helps protect ultimately, if there was a complaint, and especially if clients forget those conversations, at least you have those notes behind you, and that helps support as was mentioned, helps supports the sales process. Because it talks about, meeting with the client, when were those last discussions, what was talked about, and it supports all the way through to the suitability. So we're seeing that part, and we're trying to obviously train up on the notes piece. Because the fact-finding, it's all about understanding what if we take it back in terms of very basics, and I simplify it, is, when we're meeting with our clients, it's, what do we need to know about the client? What are they looking for? What's their financial circumstances? And that's all about fact-finding. We need that because we're going to be servicing and advising. So then we lead into what are their objectives? Well, the risk tolerance needs assessment is all about, what are they looking for? What are their current needs? What short-term, long-term? And then, based on that whole assessment, what is it that we need to do from a recommendation? So really, you take it all the way back down, despite this, the approach, that's really what it's getting down to, the really core essence of servicing a client and advising.
Yeah, that like the story of the file, and I like what you said about sales support. Greg will like this, because some advisors who are using these, I don't know if they're reporting to you, but they're telling me it's opening up new sales opportunities. And that because there's now a dialogue about what are we going to do next, what are we going to do next, and this process actually supports that. So I just meant, because Greg sometimes refers to the compliance department as the Revenue Prevention Center.
We've never heard that before.
But more and more, and I think our clients too, whatever industry industry they're in, they're going through heightened compliance too, so they can respect the extra efforts you're making and they understand what's going on. Okay, so zipping along to, again, Coach mentioned this. I mean, this, again, we were waiting with anxious eyes for that report. It wasn't there, but this is the fiscal report from 2015-16. And I mean, it's up there on the screen. You can see it doesn't bode well. It doesn't look well for our industry. And any comments from the panel on this?
I guess the one comment that I would make in sitting in front of the folks at Fisco, they expect 100% compliance. Like, they have a really high expectation. When they go out, and especially when it comes to, you know, CE credits and E&O and things like that, they want to know why it's not perfect. So that's why I think they use some of the language they use, because it comes across really harsh. But it's because their expectations are extraordinarily high.
Let's kind of drill into this now. And I guess, Kim, this would be maybe your bailiwick is complaints. We had to do a little pie chart, or you know, what would be the most common client complaints, industry complaints?
Yeah, we were chatting about this when we were together at breakfast. Not being aware that there's a DSC fee when they go to cash out their investment. We hear that a lot. Clients don't remember. That goes back to that reason why, needs analysis, all of that. And they, you know, why do I have to pay this fee? I'm going to steal the thunder because it's really going to be the same, right?
Well, some similar ones for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, they forget that their term renewal has a term renewal. So 10 years in, they've forgotten that, oh, it's going up in price. So things along those lines. Anything?
And that's one of the reasons why documentation in your file is so useful and so important. You know, if you have documentation that you know, you can provide to the client that you actually did know that, you know, 10 years later it was going to increase in price. That you know, that can be really helpful in resolving a lot of these complaints. Yeah, we have a question. They do, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a contract. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No question about that.
And we remind them of that gently.
We do, yeah.
Right? That they have a contract and that they signed, but, you know, still doesn't stop them from making the complaint.
No, it doesn't. That's true.
It's really amazing how many times I've seen these respective compliance departments come back and politely tell the client in a formal letter, we've reviewed your complaint, we've investigated, we've reviewed the advisor's file, and it seems clear and evident that you understood what you were purchasing. Mm-hmm. And if you'd like to contact OSFI, here's their information, but that's our decision. So they really do want to defend you and, and you know, point out to clients that, you know what, sometimes the market doesn't do what we want it to do. You're not happy, no one's happy, but you did understand what you bought. In terms of any other complaints?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that we see, in addition to the ones mentioned, is on the seg fund side, lack of alignment between funds that the client is in and their risk tolerance, and the lack of kind of understanding of that or linking back to that. And certainly as it comes to compliance documentation, when we go to the file, and if there's nothing in that file that outlines how the risk tolerance was determined, it certainly, you know, it certainly hurts that situation. But that's a number of cases we've gotten is on that misalignment on the seg fund side.
And Lynn, I'm sure you've seen plenty of damage in that area.
I say more on the, you know, the complaints have really focused more on, you know, as a client, I go, I didn't know about that. The advisor didn't tell me that, but maybe the conversation did happen. And a lot of the complaints, this is an opportunity for the client to really kind of use the complaints as an opportunity to, you know, to get back out sometimes. So there's usually the complaints will focus on, well, I wasn't familiar with the product, it wasn't disclosed to me, the complexities of features weren't told to me. So those are I think the key ones that we see.
And just on that previous slide with the approach, when you see needs analysis and risk tolerance, that's part of it if it's an investment sale. Okay, in terms of other threats, like in terms of, I guess, what keeps you up at night, what are you seeing in terms of other things you're concerned about? Like, it could be outside business activities, it could be advisors who are maybe doing syndicate mortgages or other related outside activities and unrelated outside activities. So anyone care to?
I can add to that. In terms of what's keeping me up at night, despite I guess outside of volume of regulatory change, it's I'd say conflicts of interest seems to be a hot button out there. Understanding what a conflict of interest is, because the requirements are you must disclose your conflicts of interest. You must be, because that's important. So what does that mean? And I don't know that everyone has a full understanding of that. Even as Sun Life, we gotta say, okay, what are the different areas of conflicts that we may have? Okay, and most recently, I believe, I can't remember which regulation it was. It published actually in the CSA, the Canadian Securities Administrator side. They actually published as part of their consultation paper examples of conflicts of interest. So, for example, lending of monies to a client, being involved as a executor of the client. So those are types of examples of conflicts, and I think we as a firm and as an industry could do help you understand better what are those conflicts of interest that we will need to worry about, and how do we help you manage through that, so that if it were identified through some downstream regulatory audit or complaint, that you're already protected in terms of how you've dealt with it. And one of the issues now is disclosure of conflicts is not enough. We're seeing that on the security side. So you can't just disclose away that, well, here's, I have an outside business activity and I'm just telling you right now what it is, that's it. It's not good enough. So there's higher expectations on, well, what else do we need to do on that? As a firm, do we have to put extra oversight on that? Do we have extra supervision? Does that mean that we actually now have to talk about it and look at what you do and how in your interactions, have every interaction with your client because of an outside business activity? We don't know that yet, and it does vary. So that means, again, a little bit of oversight and controls as well.
Interesting. Other things that I know there's been a lot lately that we see at the MGA level where carriers are questioning part-time advisors. So what do you see happening on that front? And usually when I'm in a room such as the caliber advisor here, I hear the advisors saying, yeah, we don't like part-time advisors. Like it's a stain on the industry.
There's a problem with being a funeral home director and selling insurance? Tide selling?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good example of a conflict.
Yeah, a package plan, there you go, absolutely. At your weakest moment. Yeah, part-time is a challenge. We try to look at them case by case. There are good reasons for part-time. Someone who is entering into the business that needs some time to transition in, but ManuLife is trying really hard to say, but tell us what that plan looks like. So we had a gentleman, he's a CFL football player. Well, what an awesome thing, right? He knows that his career is quite limited in terms of lifespan, so he's, looking to enter into the business. So, those are things that we can kind of get behind. The Uber driver, not so much. What's he selling when you're sitting in the back of the car? So it's about keeping that professionalism in the business, because it's important. We've worked really hard to be seen as professionals. We need to keep that. I would like to just go back to the thing that's keeping me up at night, life settlements and viaticals. And how quickly they're moving, and how deceitful some of it can be in the way that we are seeing it happen. Very much something that we are monitoring and watching for. So.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of biggest threats to advisors, we talked about some, having the documentation because client numbers are short and things. What I'd like to do right now is just cue up a video, because in my experience, one of the most shocking and perhaps upsetting things that can happen to an advisor is going through a FinTrack audit and being informed that they've been selected. And one of our successful advisors, and she's here at this meeting today, Wendy Brookhouse of Black Star Group, out on the East Coast, went through an experience an audit experience and kindly agreed, with the help of Don Hart and Kelly Gustafson, our technology team, to put together a little video. So I wanted to cue that up right now.
Hi, my name is Kelly Gustafson, and I'm the National Director of Sales Innovation at IDC Worldsource Insurance Network, and I have recently sat down with President Conference Qualifying Advisor Wendy Brookhouse from Halifax, Nova Scotia.
So it was a beautiful day in October when I got the word. We had received a phone call from FinTrack, and we had randomly been selected to go through an audit. A lot of disbelief in my mind because I'm just in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Why would they choose an advisor from Halifax to go through an audit? So luckily we had done some preparation. We got the letter from them, we fulfilled all the requirements, sent it all up, and we had our 2.5-hour audit in December. We're still waiting for our response letter now, but there are 5 things I learned from that audit process. Number 1, they are thorough. They read your binder or your policies and procedures from beginning to end. They ask to see a number of applications that you've done, and they actually were able to say, you know, that application that you used was out of date. You should have used a more up-to-date form. So they are very thorough. Don't think that they're just going to breeze over everything. They are going to look at everything. The second thing is that, believe it or not, the FinTrack website is awesome. It has a ton of information. Now, the interesting piece is the auditor kept referring us back to the website. They had just updated it 2 to 3 weeks prior, and there is a ton of information that can help you make sure that all your policies and procedures are up to date and on track. 3, the IDC template is an excellent starting point. But that's what it is, a starting point. You need to go through it and customize it. And what we also learned is that you have to be very specific. So we were very general, and we had to go back and actually really be specific about who does what, how does it get escalated, who does these things. So that was the 3rd thing that we learned. The 4th thing we learned is that you are responsible to actually keep up to date on the list of terrorists and terrorist groups in Canada. And what you are supposed to be doing is actually making sure on a regular basis, like with every new client or at least once a week, that all the new clients you have are not on that list. So that was brand new to us, and now we've had to integrate that into our process, but that was the 4th thing I learned. And the 5th, and maybe not so hardest thing, was that every time you do a corporate account, you actually have to sign off that they have the ability to bind the corporation. And it's not necessarily always accounted for in the insurance forms themselves, so you actually should have your own separate form so that they can say that they have that authority. And so the audit was finished. It was actually relatively painless, but stressful all at the same time. So those are just some things I learned, and I hope you can use them to, if you get randomly selected, we'll have a great audit time.
And by the way, thank you so much, Wendy. That was a very open-hearted gesture to do that for us and to share the experience of getting whacked in the face with something like this. And by the way, that's an example of some of the content on our WinBig and IDCWIN Institute platform, which is our 2.0 website. So if you're not on there yet, tons of training material, experiential material like this. But I'm going to throw this over for comment to our 2 resident AML experts, Colin and Gord, for, give us some of your comments to this video.
Sure. And I would share a lot of the views and the sentiment from Wendy. We, with the amount of advisors in our channels, we get a call a few times a month from advisors who have just gotten that letter, and they are going through that stress. And we do a phone meeting with them to help prepare them and give them guidance for what's ahead. And they are going, it is a lot stressful, and Wendy's right, they're very thorough. But when we position it as this is meant to be somewhat educational, we kind of lower that stress level. And it is, at the end, as Wendy said, it's not all that painful. But it is painful when you're preparing for it and you're dealing with the uncertainty of it. So, and it also, as Wendy said, the template for the AML program, as we built it out, was meant to cover a high majority of advisor practices. But it's also meant to be accommodated to each of your unique practices. So you should go through the template and see if there's any differences in your practice that should be indicated in the program. So totally support what Wendy's saying there. In terms of, when the letter comes out in the closing letter, we have a phone meeting with the advisor to say, how did it go? Send us your closing letter. We'd like to have a look at it. And we kind of adjudicate or help them through the next steps at times. One of the things I would say that's somewhat unfortunate, but I think it happens too often, is the experience that you get as advisor based on the FinTrack auditor that you get. And some of the things that they might say to you as best practices, and you're in a position of wondering, well, do I have to do that or not? Is that required or not? And Wendy pointed out a couple of those things in terms of terrorist financing or power to bind. And that's the unfortunate part, is sometimes when the advisor lets us know, well, the advisor said this thing, and then we actually go deeper on it, well, it turns out perhaps maybe you didn't have to, it's not a requirement to do that or not, or maybe it's really a best practice, and the auditor should have outlined that to you. So that is something that to be wary of if you are selected, that sometimes that experience will vary a little bit, and perhaps when you focus on your closing letter as to in terms of what really do you need to do to fix things up. So, but I would say, and thank you, Wendy, for doing that, I would say we have very similar experiences to what you've outlined.
And I just have to say, Gord, your materials and templates, I mean, Canada Life was one of the first to jump out and try and give you something in terms of a template to go by. And it's no small risk for them to do that. And the carriers have all adopted tools and templates to help you do that. But I understand you're coming up with a rewrite, update. So it's just a huge resource. Use these resources. More comments, Colin?
Yeah, mostly to echo, I guess, what Gord said. I think, what I've heard from advisors is that the FinTrack examinations are not necessarily consistent in terms of the examiners. I think they had to ramp up their process, and so, it's difficult as an advisor, but you really want to understand your obligations so that there may be circumstances where that examiner is overreaching a little bit, and to be able to push back on that, it's understanding what it is you have to do, and I'm sure Eric is a great resource for that sort of thing. So, keeping in touch is important when you get these examinations.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw out one last question, and then we'll see if there's any questions from the floor. But APEXA. So this is an industry initiative. And anyone in the audience heard of APEXA? Okay, a few hands. It's picking up steam. It's an industry initiative. It's an agent contracting tool and compliance tool. Best way to describe it is, you have 20 or whatever insurance companies up here, 5 MGAs down here, and you have the advisor in the middle. And sometimes doing contracts here and there, and each entity is cross-checking and creating a lot of work for you, and wanting your license sent there, and a copy of your, Well, the APEXA system is that hourglass in the middle, and it allows you to electronically maintain your agent profile, upload your ASQ, your advisor screening questionnaire that you would complete anyways when you want to contract with a new carrier. And it allows you to upload your forms, your E&O, your license, your CD credits, everything in one stop. So now if you want to activate a new contract with a carrier, say any carrier X or YZ, you hit a button, and if that carrier's on APEXA, they get access to your APEXA profile. So one of the companies, Sun Life, reported to me that their contracting timeline for advisors has gone from something like 14 days down to 3 days.
Fantastic.
So it is a system that we're getting more and more advisors on and getting excited about it. But your thoughts, experience, I know we have ManuLife is on APEXA, we have Sun Life, Canada Life, Equitable is in the batter's box.
Yeah, that's right. Not on yet, yeah.
Okay. So what's been your experience so far?
For those that are using it, it's fantastic. I would frame another point and just say, from personal experience, I know how difficult it is to keep your licensing up to date in the various provinces because it renews on various dates with various requirements at various times with different money, and it's just a nightmare. That is your lifesaver. That is the one spot where it's all in one location. So I would look at it very strongly as a licensing tool for yourself and your business. Eric and I were talking about it. It's great from our perspective. ManuLife, we can see, we were already using a web application, so this kind of continues on our process. We're going through some internal changes, but we will be able to actually feed APEXA information into our back office system, and also then in turn feed information into APEXA sometime late next year. So by all means, I would really recommend that you take the time and get yourself loaded.
Yeah, I'd say ManuLife, we were an early supporter, an early adopter of APEXA. Certainly our contracting area is looking forward to certainly broader usage. They see a lot of the benefits.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the vision of APEXA and with the intel that it can provide and the contracting efficiencies is something that we're just continuing to want to see broaden the usage.
And I mean, again, in terms of the regulators looking at our industry, looking at how we're getting organized, when we tell them about APEXA as an industry internal initiative, they like that. They really look at it as a tool that's going to help us get organized. And to Kim's point, like these disasters we see where an advisor electronically submits some apps and didn't realize his license was not renewed, and then the apps have to be retracted and rescinded, and all that would have gone away with a system like APEXA. So eventually, and certain E&O companies will automatically feed your E&O into it. So the industry is getting connected in this way. And I mean, on stage, yesterday we heard one of the panelists say there's some shenanigans going on out there. Well, a system like this as well will give more visibility so that that outlier advisor who's doing the wrong thing on purpose will be able to see that clearly. And again, put the regulators' minds at ease that, you know what, we have a good organized system. The left hand knows what the right hand is doing. So I'd like to thank our panel and thank you all for listening. So we'll end it on that note.
Good, thank you.